White people were never working class. They weren't working class. They were managing it. From the very beginning, the category of white worker functioned less as a material condition and more as a racialized buffer, a cushion between the ruling elite and the global exploited. They weren't crushed by empire. They were employed by it. When the transatlantic slave trade mechanized profit across continents, poor white settlers weren't resisting the machine. They were greasing its gears. They weren't chained in hulls. They were loading the ships. They weren't sold on auction blocks. They were monitoring them. And when black slaves fled into forests, swamps, or mountains, the white working class didn't show solidarity. They formed slave patrols. You want to call that working class? When European peasants were starving under feudalism, it was real. But the second they touched stolen soil, they were given a deal. Abandon your class for your color. Trade your struggle for a new identity, whiteness, and you will be spared. Not rewarded, not elevated, but spared. Land grants, militia posts, homesteads, all on indigenous blood. Meanwhile, black freedmen were banned from trades. Chinese laborers were lynched for daring to open laundries. Mexican farm workers had their wages stolen and their bones broken. The Irish weren't forced into whiteness. They petitioned for it, weaponized it, and abandoned their own hunger the moment they could starve someone else in their place. The American labor unions, explicitly white only for most of their foundational years, they wrote anti-black, anti-Asian, anti-immigrant language into their charters. These weren't errors. These were structural commitments to maintaining a white wage floor by suppressing everyone else's access to one. When mines collapsed and textile mills caught fire, the world mourned. But what didn't get printed was who got excluded from the unions, who got locked out of factories, who got deported after organizing. And when Global South workers rise up today, Bangladeshi garment workers, Congolese cobalt miners, Haitian farmers resisting monocrops, where is the white working class? Not on the picket line, not in the streets. They're in YouTube comment sections defending capitalism. Terrified, someone might call them privileged. They were never working class. They were class tourists, showing up when the job paid well, leaving when it required solidarity. Even the phrase white working class is a misdirection. It suggests that white people suffered the same, bled the same, died the same as the global underclass, when in fact they were always positioned to be the lowest rung of the overseers, not the oppressed. They lived on top of red-lined neighborhoods. They collected union pensions while black veterans were denied mortgages. They inherited homes bought with subsidies that non-white families were barred from. They built their small businesses while ICE raided the competition. They called it hard work, but the system was always rigged in their favor at every step. The whiteness was the job. The struggle was the costume. The class was an illusion. And now they dare to talk about being left behind. They were never on the bottom. They were on the platform, stepping over bodies they helped bury. White people were never working class. They were the middle managers of empire, paid just enough to keep kicking downward. Cope.
That video that we have watched, I cannot unwatch it. I can't unsee and listen that because it has a lot of truth packed in that statement. That is a video from this white historian teacher, and he's talking about why white people were never working class. Working class or white working class, it was like a job to them. Now, I'll say this, that is so much powerful. And when this white history teacher, who is the one laying out this, it shows that even people who benefited from the system can no longer deny the truth of how it was built. It means that the mask is slipping. The very people who once upheld and taught the myth of white working class struggle are now exposing it. The guilt right now is shifting into confession. When a white historian voices, when a white historian come out with this, it is not just critic. It is an admission that we were not victims, we were the overseers. It validates what black thinkers have always been saying, from W.B.E. Du Bois, the wage of whiteness, to Malcolm X, and beyond, because black scholars have saying this all along. It's something that we knew, but nobody listened to black people. It has been a reality for decades. Now, even white educators right now are echoing it. Okay? Now, Before I go down with my commentary, I have a lot to say, but let's listen to this and then we come back and talk more.
So just come back off of doing the segment on GB News about white working class boys being demonised by the establishment, the woke liberal elite and the mainstream media, which they have been for decades now. They're all crying out since this Adolescence Netflix series came out the other day, all of a sudden massively worried about what's going on with working class white boys in Britain, when actually they're the ones who have created this crisis for going back since before I was born, frankly. And I've taken this so personally because I was one of those working class white boys. There were times when my mum, a single mum, grew up in a poor part of London, couldn't even afford to buy food in her food shop. We have to leave it on the side at the till or put it back on the shelves. We had to sleep on mattresses on the floor. We had to graft to get out. I've had to graft to get out of the poverty cycle that we were stuck in. And most working class white boys are stuck in Britain because they've been completely forgotten about, completely demonised. There's no DEI programmes for them. There's no help from the government. In fact, it's just pure classism. Even the major political parties, the Labour Party, which was meant to represent those poor boys, those poor working class men, it's just completely forgotten about them. Doesn't care about them anymore. In fact, it sneers at them. And this is what we've been having to put up with for so long. And I'm lucky. I was one of the lucky ones. I grafted my way out of it. But even though there are many lads who do similar things that I do, working their arse off to try and graft out of that poverty cycle, that can't do it. They just can't because they get blocked. They might apply for a job. They might have worked really hard, apply for a really big job, and then they find out, oh, sorry, you lost out because of the DEI candidate box needed ticking. I mean, it's absolutely abysmal what we've done to British people, British working class lads. And now people like the Prime Minister are standing up in Parliament, basically comparing them, well, not him, but, there's these comparisons being thrown around in the media that they're misogynistic terrorists now. They're running around with knives. That's not the reality, is it? They're not the ones committing mass knife attacks on other people. That's not reality. That's not what's been portrayed in the news, is it? That is a false narrative. That is stigmatization. That is treating these young lads like they're some kind of, terrorists in waiting, when actually all they've ever really needed is a little bit of help and a little bit of listening to by the government and the powers that be. But of course, they're only doing it now because there's a Netflix drama about it, aren't they? It makes me so sick. These people are so sinister. I really wish British people would wake up and stop electing these people and stop listening to these mainstream media outlets that don't care about their kids, don't care about them. They just want to feed you the same narrative. It's your fault. You're the reason why this exists. Vote for us and we'll change it. They never change anything. They never have changed anything. I really hope other young working class lads can wake up and see that, because you do need to get politically active. You do need to get involved if you want to change the system. You can't just sit on the sidelines and just hope your life's going to get better, that some miracle's going to happen, because it's not. You have to be involved in it. You can't let other people try and dictate your life to you, because that's exactly what they've taught you at school. Follow this, do this, and you'll get better. You'll do this, you'll do that. We know that doesn't work. We know it's failed. Okay, so you need to wake up, get involved, and care about something. Care about politics, because it does impact your life. That's one thing I realised really, really early on. If you're not engaged, they ain't going to care about you at all. They will not care about you. If they don't think you're going to vote, they don't care about you. There's no DEI crusader coming to help you. So for the parents out there that have got young kids, young boys, if you're working class and you think, how am I going to get my kids out of this cycle? Tell them they need to start becoming more politically active and using their voices, because that's the only way governments are going to listen to you.
Like, there's nothing for the working class white male, even housing. You can't access social housing because you're down on the list. Everybody's sort of got to go the private route, which is extortionist. But I've seen so many other people whose lives have deteriorated. I haven't seen any significant changes where I live. Any improvements, it seems to be rolling on just the same. I understand that it takes time to implement these things, but they came with a plan, a rhetoric, a manifesto of what they were going to do, and to be perfectly honest, I haven't seen any any fallout, any improvements. It's still the same problems around here, still the same homelessness, this drug addiction, the same social poverty. I mean, if we come together, you know, maybe with someone who pops up in a political party who's got a bit of charisma and understands the problems beyond the divide and conquer.
Do you feel like your life's improved since the Tories were kicked out?
My life's been pretty much the same. It hasn't been any different. It may be different once this PIP review's done, but at the moment it's no different.
No better, no worse.
No better, no worse. Just the same. But I've seen so many other people whose lives have deteriorated and got worse. You know, I mean.
So this comment, the reason I said this comment begs desperately for a video reply is because the outcome of using what some people have described as the underclass, right, and certainly a certain race of the underclass, white underclass people, as the poster children for bigotry and xenophobia, is that we get this, and what it does is it erases the actual history of white working / underclass people in the UK. If you were to look into it, you would find that the under / working class, I'm going to keep doing that, in this country actually represents the most multicultural, most diverse, most inclusive sect of this society. It has much richer cultural ingredients in it than any other class in the country. White working class people and the white underclass have needed community because they haven't had, you know, the financial backing, the social mobility, the access and so on. So they've relied on each other. And that's meant it hasn't mattered what faith they were, what race they were, what any of their background was. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? How can we help each other? And I'm summarizing this quite heavily, but genuinely, the white / underclass, white working / underclass members of the UK have been historically the most inclusive parts of society, without question. So it's unfortunate that you would say this, because honestly, the truth of the matter is, this is, no, I will defend them. I will defend them, because we're looking again at a very loud minority here. And we can certainly still point out, you know, underclass racists, underclass racism, we could point that out, but we're not going to ignore and shut down the magnitude at which white working / underclass people in the UK have allowed so many varieties of people into their community. And it may not actually be a matter of we don't have, therefore, it might simply be a case of they just are just like, I don't really care who you are, where you're from. Are you a good person? Fantastic. Let us be in commune together. That's it. But comments like this erase that history deeply. And it's sad. And this is why I make videos like I do.
The white working class are probably the most ignored demographic in the UK. And this brother here is going to explain why.
You look at the education statistics now, but amongst the white working class as opposed to the children of immigrants, Chinese and African and Asian and black kids, they're outscoring them. Why are they outscoring them? Because they are the children of immigrants, and the immigrants value education. But they don't look at themselves as a fixed thing. They look at themselves as potential.
Yeah, what they could be.
They could be. And we look at ourselves as, this is what I am, and don't you dare change it. That's the problem.
That's fascinating.
I'm not here to play Trauma Olympics, but we do need to speak on the fact that the white working class are literally completely ignored in society, and they're made to feel that way from birth. From inception, people from the white working class community are made to feel that they are fixed in that life. They cannot move up the social ladder, and they're already at the bottom, and this is who they are. And that is a massive problem, because that is not how society should be. It's preventing a lot of able, smart children to actually pursue careers or go into higher education, just because society perpetuates a narrative that they are white working class and they're going to remain like that from birth until death. And I've seen this from my own personal experience, like going to a state school in a predominantly area surrounded by council estates. Like, you see white children, they just think that they're dumb. They think, this is who I am, I'm going to work, in the warehouse. I'm going to be a builder. I'm going to be a plumber. I'm going to do some laborer's job. And that's who I am. Like, I don't deserve working in the city because that's for people who are posh. Or that's for people who go to private education and stuff like that. And this is just not a viewpoint in which they're born with. This is because it's a narrative which is perpetuated through society through different means. Through the media, when you watch TV shows, dramas, and how the white working class are portrayed as chavs, uneducated, dumb, illiterate, things of that nature. I see this in the education system. From my own personal experience, I see teachers banter with children from council estates and be like, oh, you're just like this, you're going to remain like this. Like, you're continuing to pound that narrative, like, you're going to remain poor and you're going to remain working class. This is not how society should be, because there are a lot of able, smart, intelligent, white working class people which are able to do jobs just like anyone else in the city, in tech, in law, in whatever field. And another problem here is that the white working class usually feel as if policies which are there to improve the livelihood of people from ethnic minorities are being put forward at the expense of their own demise. So I was speaking to an individual. He was white. He came from a white working class background, lived in a council estate, all of that. And literally, he spoke to me and said, listen, I don't feel comfortable with the fact that a lot of these employers are pushing like black diversity programs, all these little good policies for black people and ethnic minorities, but then white people ignored. Like, what's happening? I think it's too much for black people. I am here for inclusive policy making, which ensures that all communities from disadvantaged backgrounds actually rise up the social mobility, or have the ability to rise up the social mobility ladder. And I think the lack of conceptual understanding of the white working class community is really hindering or blinding the ability to see that this is not the fault of black people or ethnic minorities. This is actually down to society perpetuating a long history of literally downtroddening on white working class people. And that really needs to stop, because they deserve as much opportunities as the next man. But this is just showcasing how there are so many different vehicles which stops a lot of different communities from actually getting careers in finance, tech, law, and other high paying roles. And that's my hot take from what I recently watched. If you enjoyed that, please give me a follow. If you have any comments on that sort of topic area, please put it in the comment section. Otherwise, hope you have a good one.
White people did not exist on planet Earth until 1681. We learn from this history that white people were built upon the idea that British had of themselves as white, as Christian, as freeborn, as deserving of rights and privileges from which others can be denied. To this day, white people have not been defined as a matter of law to this day. This history teaches us that white is the tool by which laborers were divided. Those who shared the same living conditions, the same opportunities, now experience ourselves as more connected with Paris Hilton than with our African American neighbor. The first Congress of the United States determined 1790 that in order to become a naturalized citizen of this new republic called the United States of America, one had to be white. This was valid law in the United States until 1952. You had to be white to be a U.S. citizen. 1952.
Because white people are a very recent invention, first of all. And I say invention. And in America, for example, it's very clear in a sense. People who came here for great complex of reasons, none of which they faced yet, which is part of their problem. And were not white before they got here. They were Irish, or English, or Polish, or Dutch, or German. They didn't become white until they got here. And they had to become white here in self-defense because I was here. And I was here for them. I was here to work for them, to keep them white, in fact. It turns out that the doctrine of white supremacy, is probably one of the grimmest events in human history, you know, since the discovery of syphilis. Because it blinds so many people to the truth about themselves.
Click the link in the bio to get the book. We're going to talk about whiteness in a way that I haven't heard it in a lot of other places, but this is what went wrong. Like, if you ever wanted to know what went wrong, like, this is what went wrong. Like, what? Like, you ever looked at them and, you know, wondered how they all made these crazy decisions? This is how it happened. Okay? Like, the betrayal was against memory itself. So, it didn't start with slavery or colonization. Those were actually symptoms of a greater issue. It began when white identity was constructed by erasing rootedness. European tribes like the Irish, the Scots, the Germans, the Norse, they did have indigenous ways of living, right? Of being. Seasonal living, oral storytelling, grief rituals, communal economies. When empire logic, Rome, Catholic Church, feudalism, consolidated power in Europe, it forced those people to forget their rootedness and to replace memory with domination. The root was severed, survival through control. They didn't metabolize anything, not connection, right? Just control again. This was the first recursion. This is when they turned in on themselves, right? The first rise of this unprocessed entropy inside whiteness. It's rootless survival. It's identity by domination. It's memory replaced by mythic supremacy. And then that's how you end up with expansion without metabolization. So when Europeans came to the New World, they didn't arrive whole, right? They arrived already severed, already looping. They didn't integrate the grief of losing old Europe. They exported it. They didn't mourn their exile from memory. They externalized it on the people they colonized. Conquest wasn't just greed, it was spiritual panic. Because if you're not rooted in memory, you only feel alive by expanding your domination, by making more land, more wealth, more slaves, more laws, more mirrors, and thus their entropy, their unprocessed experiences exploded. But it was coded as civilization. So when American identity was built, it wasn't metabolized selfhood. It was built on dumping these unprocessed experiences, these entropy onto others. So indigenous people got labeled uncivilized to offload their own severed ancestral memory. Right? Black people were property to offload their terror of being spiritually homeless because they felt spiritually homeless. Immigrants were treated like threats to offload their fear of being spiritually replaceable. Projection became policy. Projection became culture. Projection became destiny. America never healed from Europe. It just renamed its wounds. So every genocide, right? Every stolen plantation, every gentrified city, every new suburb, every Wall Street boom, every school built on erasure, every church built without confession is material success reinforced. It is material success reinforced spiritual entropy. It is material success reinforcing, right, spiritual unprocessed experiences for them. So the more whiteness succeeded externally, the more it hollowed out internally. So their collective brokenness rose because every reward for survival was tied to a denial of memory, right? The maw grew, the silence deepened, the performance sharpened. So here's just the facts, right? It was really a bit of a 4-stage process. Severance from ancestral rootedness, loss of metabolized memory, survival through domination, entropy weaponizes progress, projection on others, externalization of internal panic, and reinforcement through wealth. So that it looped, got hardened in the culture. So white America's original sin is not slavery. It's the refusal to mourn the first loss of rootedness. So this is all just a disgusting projection. It's really this humiliating. Like I want people to sit with that. Like, we're watching them grieve in public. All of this is grief. All of it. Rape, slavery, genocide, imperialism. Those were the fevered dreams of a people trying not to remember what it felt like to be abandoned by their own history. So every time memory tried to return, they doubled the performance instead of softening. This is why black people look so nasty to them. Because if we can build a culture, even in the midst of that, of exile, it makes all of this grief look meaningless. It has to be destroyed in that way, right? So they have no home. You ask a black person where it all starts from, you might say you might get answers like slavery in Africa. You ask a white person, you'll hear Europe. Okay, but you hear exactly the same. Africa, Europe, they're as disconnected, if not worse, and they've been materially rewarded for it through this reinforcement. So this was a crazy deep take, but this is exactly what's going on.
I'll tell you something. This video that I came across it, a white history teacher, and I want you to hear this clearly. He has said white people were never the working class. Okay? They weren't crushed by empires. They were employed by it, okay? And that's an admission. Now, whiteness was a job. Whiteness was a job. Let me start from there. When we hear the phrase white working class, it's supposed to conjure up an image of poor, suffering white families. Yes, poor, suffering white families. Coal miners, textile workers, Irish immigrants laying railroad tracks, factory workers in Detroit, just poor white people, okay? And that's all that I've been thinking, by the way. I was thinking white working class people were poor white people. I never knew there is something behind this. So the truth is, whiteness itself was a job. The position of white workers in the empire was never about shared struggle, okay? Was never about shared struggle with the oppressed. It was about managing the oppressed, keeping them in track, keeping the oppressed in chain, keeping them controlled, and keeping them exploited. Now, after listening to this video, I thought about something. During the transatlantic slave trade, the people who were chained in the hearts of ships were Africans. People who were whipped, branded, sold on auction were Africans. Then who was running auctions? Who loaded those ships? Come to think of that. Who patrolled the fields and forests hunting down black people who resisted? They were white workers, not the elite, but these which we call white working class. So from the very beginning, whiteness wasn't about being crushed by empire. Whiteness was about being hired by the empire, okay? And that's why this teacher said white people were employed by empire, not destroyed by it. They had a deal, the deal of whiteness, okay? The empire offered a deal to poor Europeans, remember? Europe itself was full of peasants and starving people, okay? And many of these people left Europe in despite of conditions. But when they arrived on stolen indigenous soil in the America, the deal was presented. The deal was just simple, okay? Abandon your class, abandon your solidarity with Africans, indigenous people, and later with Asians and immigrants. In exchange, you will be given a new identity, and this identity is whiteness. And that's why we learned that white people were not there. White people came in the Mideast because they left their identity, they left their solidarity with the Africans, with the Asians, with the Indians, and joined the empire, and they were rebranded to white people. They were not given not freedom, not true equality, but a kind of insurance policy that you won't be treated like a slave, you won't be hunted like a runaway, you will be spared from the worst. And in exchange, you will play your part. In exchange, you will patrol the fields. You will protect plantations. You will enforce laws. You will take militia posts. Okay? Making sure that black and brown people remain crushed. Are we together here? Are we getting something? That was the betrayal of solidarity, because history books often tells us something, that workers united, that unions were built to fight for fair wages and safe conditions. But who were those unions really for? The Irish who came to America starving from famine didn't resist whiteness. They did not reject the empire's deal. They petitioned to be included in it. They weaponized whiteness against black people. They abandoned their own hunger by making sure someone else starved on their behalf. Look at the labor unions in America, okay? For most of their foundational years, they were white only. They wrote anti-black, anti-Asian, they wrote the languages into their character. And these weren't incidents. These weren't oversights. These were structural choices. They were commitments to whiteness over class solidarity. And so when black workers tried to organize, when Asian laborers fought for rights, when Mexican workers demanded dignity, white unions shut them. The so-called white working class chose whiteness over solidarity every time. My goodness. Today I've learned something new. Today I've get each and every day. And that's why I tell my black people, my black youths, keep on researching. Because when you keep on researching, you come up with the clear truth, clear history of our ancestors. Come on. I'm young on history. I don't lie. I never knew about this. Yeah, I never knew about this. So each and every time I'm learning something new, and you are the reason why I'm learning these things. I know these things because of you watching the videos and making me to make more videos. The more I make videos, the more we are learning together. I know you know this. I have a number of viewers who are 45 plus, 60 years, 65, 70 years. I know you know this, but I have younger generation. We need to know this. So if you get a chance to comment down there, the books I need to read and the videos you want me to watch too, you can send me there. I'm very gladly willing to learn a lot from you guys. Now, we have the myth of white suffering that I've been hearing. That myth, it was brainwashing me because I thought white people were suffering. Now, I'm not here to say that white workers never died in mines. No. I'm not disputing that. I'm not here to say that they were never injured in factories or never lost children in industrial accidents. Of course they did, but here's the question, okay? We don't hear about black workers excluded from those jobs entirely. We don't hear about the migrants deported after trying to organize. We don't hear about the black veteran denied housing, okay? While white veterans collected pensions and brought homes in the suburbs. So the suffering of white workers was real, okay? But it was always buffered by the privilege of whiteness. Yes, they suffered, but never like the global underclass, okay? They were positions not as oppressors, but they were positions as the lowest rank of the overseers. Now, look at Bangladesh. That's about global south today. The so-called white working class in all of this, okay? Look at Bangladesh right now. Garment workers fight against impossible conditions. In Congo, cobalt miners dig in toxic pits for the materials that power our phones that we are using. In Haiti, farmers resist monocrops that destroy their lands. So, where is that so-called white working class in all of this? They are not in the streets. They are not in the picket lines. They are not in the solidarity with the global south. Okay? And the white historian has said they are in the comment section in our videos. They are in the comment section online defending capitalism, crying about being called privileged, terrified that someone might point out their role as beneficiaries of empires. And this is why the phrase of white working class is a misdirection. Okay? It suggests they bled the same with black people, for example. They struggled the same, they suffered the same as global oppressed, but history shows that they didn't struggle the same as black people. They did not. We call a spade a spade. The white working class, they were middle management. We call it as it is, okay? The white working class were never the bottom. They were the middle managers. They were given just enough land grants, land pensions, homesteads, wages, to keep them loyal to the system. They were not on the ground with the enslaved. That's what we need to know. White working class were not in the field with the enslaved. They were not in solidarity with the colonized. They were not crushed by the empire, but they were hired by the empire to keep check on the enslaved. And when they cry today about being left behind, we need to remind them that you were never on the bottom. You were standing on the platform, stepping over the bodies you helped. That's according to the white historian teacher, and I'm repeating that. Okay? Now the fact is that this white history teacher is saying this out loud, and the lie is breaking. Okay? And their own people cannot deny it. They cannot deny it anymore because we always say the truth will never be hidden underground forever, because it is raining, and when it rains, the soil becomes weak. When soil becomes soft, the bones are coming out. The bones of truth are coming out. And for centuries, they have told us that white people suffered the same, that white people were poor, that they were the victims too. But now, even their educators, even their researchers, even the professors are admitting that whiteness was a choice, a contract. Whiteness was a job description. And if they are admitting it now, it is because history has caught up with them. The oppressed are rising, Africa is rising, the diaspora is rising, the global south is rising, and the empire can no longer hide its truth. So, no matter which day, no matter which year, which century, eventually the truth will come out. Even if you try to erase, you try to ban books, you try to close the history schools, the lie can never be hidden. So, let me be clear. White people were never working class. They were the overseers of the empire. That's all we need to get from this video. So the wages of the whiteness were always paid in blood, not their blood, but blood of black people. When I zoom back to Europe before colonization, in feudal Europe, peasants were crushed under brutal systems. Okay, they were starving, working the land for lords and kings, barely surviving. And that was real class oppression. It was a real working class. okay, back then in Europe before colonization. But the moment those peasants set foot on the stolen soil in America, the deal was offered, and that deal was told that you don't have to suffer like anymore, but only if you accept whiteness. So they did not suffer. They never suffered. And this matters because the confusion of that white teacher is so much powerful, because it is one thing when we say it as black people, and we have been saying it. So it's one thing when black scholars write it. It's one thing when freedom fighters shout it. But when a white history teacher admits it, it means that it's even the beneficiaries of the system can't deny it anymore right now. So it matters today because empire is shaking and Europe is in crisis. America is in decline and Africa is rising, okay? So this moment, white people are just trying to write themselves as victims again. They're trying to say that we are here. Look at us. Let's admit. Let's work together. But you know what? Black people, we are at the center of everything because we are the right deal. Tell me what you think of the comment section. Until next episode, peace out.
No,